Another practical, wonderful tool to support bilingualism at home is a content-based approach. So the content-based approach to language acquisition is an instructional method that uses content. So we use a subject matter to learn a language. So basically, whether it's a math or science or maybe just, I don't know, a plant growing situation, there is always a opportunity to learn a language. There is an old way of learning languages when you do like open the book, read the text, underline the unknown words, then translate those words, learn those words, and reread again, and you see, now I understand the context. When you do something physical and exciting, this process becomes a learning context for a language. So for instance, you are cooking, and while the cooking process, there's so much language opportunities. For instance, you can talk about verbs, like cut, add water, now reduce the fire, stir. Then we can talk about the adjectives, ready, or adverbs. It's ready, not ready, it looks green, it looks red, it's tasty, it's not tasty. And then we can talk about the time. It will be ready in 5 minutes, so you use a future construction. So there are just enormous opportunities to scaffold language in almost every situation. But I took it to the next level. For instance, I use the science as a scaffold for the language, and I started to do that early, because in my mind the science vocabulary is a totally different animal. If we don't have an access to the input from outside, which is relevant to our situation because we live in a different country, and we have access to the science in the language of community. I don't have access to the science in my native language. So I decided, okay, let me start introducing science early on, and we are going to learn language through the scientific situations, experiments, and different activities. Therefore, we are developing a scientific vocabulary in both languages, and we also, as a side gig, we have a content knowledge. So we learn, let's say, whatever science, biology, for instance, we plant beans, and she knows how to plant beans in both languages. But just because she knows the process, she can figure out how to use words explaining that process. So that was my approach, to use the science as a foundation for learning my native language, because there is an opportunity that at some point she might be exposed to the text or to the message or to the speech where the 50% of the words are unknown because they are scientific. So I decided to cut these potential problems off early on. So this approach views language as a means to the end rather than an end itself. The end in the using of the content is, of course, learning the content or subject matter. But the process of the road to that end is through the language, through the learning new words. And it emphasizes the development of the both language and context knowledge. So it has a benefit, hitting, you learn language, but you also learn a content. In the content-based language development environment, kids learn language by studying content areas such as history, science, mathematics, biology, chemistry, I don't know, whatever. The goal is to provide the context for the language learning that is meaningful, relevant, and engaging for students or kids. In this case, if you start early with your children, start with something what they like to do, what they are interested to do. So it's obvious that you cannot talk about astrophysics to toddlers, right? 5 years later, all the way, you can explore astrophysics to the infinity. But when they're toddlers, talk about what bothers them right now, about behaviors, about feelings, emotions, about other people, communicational themes. So use the context and content to learn the language. So by focusing on the content, kids can see the particular use of the language and can become more motivated to learn those languages. Relevance and authenticity. Content-based approach is often more relevant and authentic than traditional language classes, which can improve students' motivation to learn their language and improve their proficiency. It also allows them to develop multiple skills. This approach can help students develop a range of language and content-related skills. As I said, they learn cooking and they learn language that goes with the cooking. They learn how to plant the beans and they learn language that goes with this planting beans. It improves their reading comprehension, writing, critical thinking, and problem-solving skills. And it also improves their cultural awareness. Content-based approach can also allow kids to learn about different cultures and perspectives, which can broaden their cultural understanding and increase their intercultural competence. Especially if you talk about the culture or history, that is an amazing tool to kill both birds at the same time. It's important to note that the content-based approach requires well-designed and well-implemented instructional material. Additionally, this approach may also only be appropriate for some of the students. Some may have different learning styles and require a more traditional language-focused approach. So, as I told you, it can work for for some kids and students, but it may not work But if it doesn't work, it means that you need to figure out the appropriate content. For instance, I use the science and my kid loves it. However, I know that many parents just read fairy tales, and that also gives them a content and context for learning language. So be brave, just try different things. I would suggest go for science because it always pays off. But if not, just maybe use the sport. Use something else. Do something what they love to do. Maybe a science, maybe art, maybe music, maybe something else. Whatever you enjoy. Just have fun with languages. No worries.